Ma'am? The word came out flat, final, like a door being shut in someone's face. Miriam Coles stopped walking. She reached into her canvas bag, the kind you get free at a hardware convention, worn soft at the handles, and produced a cream-colored envelope with the architecture board's gold seal pressed into the corner. Derek Farrow didn't look at it. He looked at her, at the plain navy dress, at the sensible flats, at the bag. His nostrils flared slightly, the way a man's do when he has already decided something and is simply waiting for the paperwork to catch up. "I have an invitation," Miriam said. "I can see that." He didn't move. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, for, underscore, underscore, the atrium behind him glittered. Warm light bounced off the vaulted ceiling and poured down across 200 people in tailored suits and cocktail dresses, champagne flutes catching the glow like small torches. Jazz moved through the space, something slow and deliberate, a saxophone note hanging in the air like it had nowhere better to be. The room smelled of white roses and catered salmon and the particular kind of expensive cologne that announces itself before the man wearing it does. Miriam looked past Derek's shoulder at the ceiling, just for a moment. Then she looked back at him. "I'm in exactly the right place," she said. Derek Farrow took one step to the side, physically placing himself between Miriam and the entrance, and raised his voice just enough for the nearest cluster of guests to hear. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step back. We have a dress standard this evening. A professional standard." He paused. Let the next words land slowly. "You look like you wandered in from the street." Nobody moved. A woman in a silver dress glanced over, then looked away. A man in a charcoal blazer turned slightly toward the bar. A younger guest, maybe 30, met Miriam's eyes for half a second, then found something fascinating to study on the floor. The saxophone kept playing. The ice in someone's glass shifted with a soft, crystalline click. Miriam's expression didn't change. She looked at Derek the way a structural engineer looks at a crack in a load-bearing wall. Not with alarm, but with the quiet, methodical patience of someone who already knows exactly where the failure will spread and when. She reached into her canvas bag again. Not for the invitation this time, for a small, worn leather notebook and a pen. She opened it to a blank page. She wrote one line. She capped the pen. Derek watched her do it. Something moved behind his eyes. Not quite uncertainty, but the first distant cousin of it. "Security," he said, turning toward the corridor. "I need someone at the east entrance." But nobody in that room knew, not Derek, not the woman in silver, not the man at the bar, that the ceiling above their heads, the marble beneath their feet, the vaulted archway framing the whole glittering scene, had been drawn by hand in a one-bedroom apartment 23 years ago by the woman they were watching walk away. The fun is just beginning. Tell us what city you're from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. The tension is rising. Who's watching from where? Like and subscribe to the channel. More to come. Tell us in the comments who's from which country, and give us a like and subscribe. The plot thickens. Let's check our geography. Tell us where you are now. Give the video a thumbs up and subscribe. We're just warming up. Tell us where you're watching from. Give the video a like and hit the subscribe button. The climax is near. Share where you're from, like, and be sure to subscribe. Events are unfolding rapidly. Write your city in the chat, give it a like, and subscribe so you don't get lost. The juiciest part is yet to come. Let's get started. Get to know each other. Where are you from? Like and subscribe right now. The suspense is building. Tell us where you're watching this episode from and reward us with a like and a subscribe. The excitement is running high. Tell us what city you're from now. Give us a big like, and subscribe to the channel. By the end of the night, every single one of them would understand exactly what they had been looking at and wish, deeply, privately, with no way to take it back, that they had seen it sooner. Before we go further, subscribe if you haven't, and drop in the comments where you're watching from, because this story is only just beginning. To understand what happened that night, we need to go back to the beginning. Not to the gala, not to the gold-sealed invitation, to the woman. Miriam Coles woke at 5:47 every morning. Not because of an alarm. The alarm was back up. She was always awake first, lying still in the gray pre-dawn quiet of her Chicago apartment, listening to the buildings settle around her, the low groan of the elevator shaft, the hiss of the radiator, sounds she had cataloged the way other people catalog birdsong. She made coffee in a ceramic pour-over her daughter had given her 3 birthdays ago. The handle was chipped on one side. She never replaced it. She stood at the kitchen window while the water heated, looking out at the skyline she had spent 30 years helping to build, and she drank her coffee black, without ceremony, the way she did everything. Her drafting tablet sat open on the kitchen table beside a stack of site reports, a red pen clipped to the top. The margins of the reports were filled with her handwriting, small, precise, architectural. Nothing wasted, not a single word. Miriam was 53 years old. She stood 5'4" in the sensible flats she wore everywhere, and she carried herself the way certain buildings carry weight, quietly, without display, distributing the load so evenly that you only understood the engineering when you stopped and really looked. She had grown up in Claiborne County, Mississippi, the youngest of 4. Her father drove a delivery truck 6 days a week. Her mother cleaned offices in the evenings after cooking dinner, and her hands by Friday were cracked raw at the knuckles, the skin tight and dry no matter how much lotion she used. Miriam had watched those hands her whole childhood. She understood early what it meant to build something with your body. She had gotten a scholarship to study architecture at Illinois Tech. 1 scholarship, no backup. She had packed everything she owned into 2 bags and taken a Greyhound north, 17 years old with $340 in an envelope her father pressed into her hand at the station. "Don't spend it on anything that doesn't last," he said. "I won't," she told him. She never did. She had started her firm, Coles Studio, in a sublet room in Pilsen with a folding table, a used drafting board, and a single commission, a community center in Bronzeville that the city had already rejected twice. She redesigned it from scratch. It was approved on the 3rd submission. It was still standing. It had won 4 preservation awards in the last decade. That was 23 years ago. Now Coles Studio employed 61 people and had completed projects in 14 states. But Miriam's name was not on billboards. She didn't do profiles. She had turned down 2 magazine covers. "The building speaks," she told her project director once. "I don't need to." On the morning of the gala, she had received the 3rd complaint in 4 months. 3 different guests, 3 different events at the same venue, all of them describing the same security supervisor, all of them black. All of them treated, in their own words, like they had wandered in from somewhere they didn't belong. Miriam read the 3rd complaint twice. Then she set down her coffee, picked up the gold-sealed invitation, and placed it carefully in her canvas bag. She was going to see for herself. Derek Farrow had held the head of security position at the Aldrin Center for 14 months. He was 41 years old, broad through the shoulders, with a jaw that looked like it had been designed specifically to jut forward during disagreements. He wore his earpiece even when it wasn't connected to anything. He had gotten the job because the venue's operations director, a man named Paul Gretsch, had gone to high school with his older brother. That was the whole story. There was no other chapter. Derek was good at one thing, performing authority. He had learned early that if you stood straight enough, spoke clipped enough, and looked at people with sufficient boredom, most of them would simply comply. It cost nothing and required no actual expertise. He had refined the performance over years of mid-level security work at convention centers and corporate lobbies, moving from place to place every 18 months or so, always with a decent reference, always before anything became formal. The staff at the Aldrin Center had learned to read his moods through small signals. The way he straightened his lapel when he was about to make someone's shift difficult. The particular silence that preceded a dressing down in the corridor behind the coat check. The way he smiled at certain guests and didn't smile at others, and how the line between those two categories was never written down anywhere but was understood by everyone who worked there within their first week. Jade Simmons had understood it within her first 3 days. Jade was 24, worked the east entrance coat check on event nights, and had the particular alertness of someone who has spent their whole life learning to anticipate other people's moods before they become her problem. She had grown up in Evanston, the oldest of three, and she had been paying attention her whole life. She had watched Derek turn away a woman in October, a professor, it turned out, presenting at a symposium. He had told her the event was full. It wasn't. Jade had seen the empty seats herself. She had watched him do it again in December. A woman in her 60s, elegant coat, reading glasses on a beaded chain. Derek had asked her 3 times if she was sure she had the right building. Jade had mentioned it once, carefully, to her shift supervisor. __quote _14 _ the supervisor said, not looking up from his clipboard. Quote 15 quote 16, Jade said. Quote 17 quote. The supervisor looked up then, looked at her for a moment, then looked back down. Quote 18. She did her job, but she started keeping her phone charged to 100% on event nights. She wasn't sure why. It was just a habit she had developed. A small private preparation for something she couldn't name. On the night of the architecture gala, Jade arrived at her station 40 minutes early. She straightened the coat hangers. She refilled the ticket slips. She watched Derek pace the main corridor in his pressed jacket, touching his earpiece, surveying the arriving guests with the practiced eye of a man who had already decided which ones belonged. She watched him see Miriam Coles come through the outer doors. She watched his posture change, and she quietly picked up her phone. The Aldrin Center was Miriam's 3rd building. Not her most awarded, not her largest, but the one she thought about most, because it had been the hardest argument to win. The city planning committee had rejected the first design on the grounds that it was too ambitious for the site. That was the phrase they used. Too ambitious. She had driven home that evening, sat at her folding table, and opened a fresh sheet of drafting paper. She did not revise the design. She rebuilt the argument around it until the ambition looked inevitable rather than presumptuous. The committee approved it 6 months later without changing a single load-bearing element. That was 2001. The building had stood for 23 years now, and it stood the way Miriam had always intended. Not to impress, but to endure. The vaulted atrium ceiling, the east-facing clear-story windows that filled the space with morning light, the marble floors she had specified herself from a quarry in Tennessee. All of it exactly as she had drawn it, late at night, in an apartment that smelled of instant coffee and drafting eraser. She had not been back inside since the opening reception. She took a cab to the gala rather than a car service, the way she always did when she wanted to arrive without announcement. The driver had the radio on low, something with horns and a steady beat, and the city moved past the windows in streaks of amber and white. Miriam sat with her canvas bag in her lap and read through the 3rd complaint on her phone, the screen casting pale light across her face. The complaint was 3 paragraphs. Precise. The woman who wrote it had clearly written it carefully, choosing each word, the way people do when they are not sure anyone will believe them, but they are going to say it anyway. Miriam read it twice. Then she put the phone in her bag. "You all right back there?" the driver asked. "Fine," she said. "Thank you." He nodded and didn't ask again. He had a daughter, he'd mentioned at the start of the ride, who wanted to study design. Miriam had asked what kind. He'd said he wasn't sure yet. She's only 12. Miriam had said that was the right age to be unsure. He'd smiled at that in the rearview mirror. She thought about that girl, 12 years old somewhere in this city, not yet sure what she wanted to build, as the cab pulled up to the Aldrin Center's front approach. The building rose against the evening sky, its clear-story windows lit from within, warm light pressing through the glass like something alive trying to get out. Miriam paid the driver. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, the November air sharp against her face, smelling of exhaust and cold stone. She looked up at the building the way she always looked at her finished work. Not with pride exactly, but with the quiet, careful attention of someone checking that everything still held. It did. She picked up her bag. She walked toward the entrance. A young man in an event vest held the outer door open for her and smiled. Quote, 23, quote, he said. Quote, 24, quote, she said. And she went in. The confrontation at the east entrance had lasted 4 minutes. Miriam had counted, the way she counted everything. Not obsessively, but precisely, because precision was the only tool that never lied to her. She stood now on the sidewalk outside the Aldrin Center, the November cold pressing through her navy dress, her canvas bag over one shoulder. She had not raised her voice. She had not argued. She had simply been removed, politely but unmistakably, from a building she had designed from a blank page. She opened her leather notebook to the line she had written inside. Derek Farrow, East Entrance, 7:14 p.m. Then she added 4 words, same pattern, third time. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. It was her project director, Marcus. Quote, 25, quote, 26, she typed back. 3 dots appeared. Then, quote, 27, quote. She put the phone in her bag without answering. She looked up at the clear-story windows she had specified herself, the warm light still pressing through the glass, indifferent to everything that had just occurred beneath it. Across the street, a woman was walking a small dog on a red leash. The dog stopped, looked at Miriam. The woman tugged gently, and they moved on. Miriam's phone buzzed again. This time it was a number she recognized. Carol Reeves, the architecture board's events coordinator, calling from inside the gala. Miriam said. A pause. Silence. The kind that has weight. Carol's voice had gone very still. The head of security, Derek Farrow. Another pause. Miriam heard the muffled sound of the gala behind Carol's voice, the saxophone, the low hum of 200 conversations, the clink of glass against glass. Carol said carefully. Miriam said. She could hear Carol breathing. Then, quote, 38, quote, 39, quote, Miriam said. Quote, 40, quote, 41, quote, she kept her voice level. Quote, 42, quote, a long silence. Carol started. Carol said quietly. Miriam ended the call. She stood still for a moment, the cold air carrying the faint smell of exhaust and something sweet from a food cart half a block away. She thought about the 3 complaints, 3 women, 3 separate events, 3 careful, precise accounts of the same experience, written by people who understood that their words might not be believed, but wrote them down anyway. She thought about the woman in October, the professor. She thought about the woman in December with the reading glasses on a beaded chain. She thought about how many times something has to happen before it stops being an incident and becomes a policy. She straightened the strap of her canvas bag. She walked back toward the entrance. The same young man in the event vest was still at the outer door. He held it open again without hesitation, the same easy smile. Derek Farrow was already watching her from across the lobby. His expression didn't change, but his hand moved to his earpiece. He crossed the lobby in 12 steps. Miriam counted those too. Ma'am. Same word, same flat delivery, same door being shut. I explained the situation. You did, Miriam said. I have my invitation. The invitation isn't the issue. Then what is? Derek clasped his hands in front of him, a gesture that was supposed to look professional and landed somewhere closer to a barricade. This is a credentialed industry event. Attendees are expected to present in a manner consistent with the occasion. Miriam looked at him steadily. I'm wearing a dress. There's a standard, he said. I don't make the rules. You're enforcing them selectively, she said. That's a different thing. Something shifted behind his eyes, not guilt, closer to recalculation, the look of a man who has just realized the person in front of him is not going to comply on schedule. I'm going to have to ask you to step back from the entrance, he said, louder now. The volume was deliberate, an invitation for witnesses, and witnesses came. A man in a charcoal suit turned from his conversation near the welcome table. A woman with a champagne flute paused mid-sip. Two colleagues near the coat check went still, their voices dropping to nothing. The saxophone kept playing from somewhere deeper in the atrium, unhurried and indifferent. Jade, at her station, 12 feet away, pressed record. Her hands were steady. She had made the decision before he opened his mouth the second time. She held the phone low, angled up, the screen's brightness turned all the way down. Derek raised his voice another degree. Quote, 60, quote, 61, Miriam repeated, quietly, the way she might repeat a measurement that didn't add up. That's correct. And I don't fit it. He didn't answer. The non-answer was the answer. Miriam reached into her canvas bag. She produced the leather notebook again and opened it, unhurried, the worn cover soft under her fingers. She uncapped her pen. She wrote the time. She wrote his exact words, verbatim, the way she had learned to document things in the years when documentation was the only protection available to her. Derek watched her write. The vein along the side of his neck was visible now, pulsing slowly beneath the warm pendant light. Quote 64, he said. Quote 65, she said. Quote 66, quote 67. She capped the pen. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 68, underscore, 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 quote underscore 67, underscore, underscore, she capped. The cologne he wore was thick, something synthetic trying to pass for cedar. Quote 69, quote he said. Quote 70, quote Miriam closed the notebook. She looked at him the way she looked at a structural flaw in a blueprint, with patience and with the quiet certainty of someone who already knew exactly where the failure line ran and how far it would travel before everything gave way. Quote 71, she said. She didn't move. I'll wait, she said, for your supervisor. The supervisor arrived in 3 minutes. His name was Tom Heller, mid-40s, event management vest, a clipboard he was already holding like a shield. He smelled of coffee and the particular anxiety of a man who has been pulled away from something easier. He looked at Derek. He looked at Miriam. He looked at the small cluster of guests who had stopped pretending not to watch. What's the situation? He said, directing the question at Derek. Guest without appropriate credentials, Derek said. I've asked her to leave twice. Tom turned to Miriam. Ma'am, I apologize for any confusion. Can I see your invitation? Miriam handed it to him. He looked at it. His expression didn't change, but something behind it did, a small, quiet recalibration, like a level finding flat. Tom said. Derek said. Tom looked at him. A pause. The saxophone drifted through from the atrium. Someone near the welcome table set a champagne flute down on a tray, the crystal ringing softly against the metal. Quote 81, quote Derek said. Quote 82, quote Tom looked at Miriam's dress, her flats, her canvas bag. He looked back at Derek. She's appropriately dressed for the event, Tom said carefully. I made a judgment call. Your judgment call turned away a credentialed guest. Twice. Tom's voice stayed even, but the clipboard came down to his side. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 86, underscore, underscore, Derek's jaw tightened. I'm authorized to maintain the security and integrity of this event. You're authorized to check credentials and manage access. That's it. Tom handed the invitation back to Miriam. Ma'am, I apologize. You're welcome to go through. Miriam took the invitation. She didn't move immediately. She looked at Derek. Quote, 90, she said, her voice unhurried and precise. Quote, 91. She paused. Quote, 92. Tom was already writing on his clipboard. Derek's face had gone very still. The performance was cracking at the edges, not dramatically, not all at once, but the way a surface cracks when the temperature drops, quietly, along lines that were always there. I was doing my job, he said. You were doing something? Miriam said. I'm not sure it was that. She turned toward the atrium entrance. The marble floor caught the pendant light in long, warm strips. Tennessee marble, she had chosen it herself, had stood in the quarry yard on a cold Tuesday morning, running her hand along the surface until she found the right grain. She had known then exactly what it would look like under this light. She walked through the entrance. The saxophone grew louder. The smell of white roses and warm catering reached her, and beneath it, faintly, the particular smell of a building that has been lived in long enough to develop its own atmosphere, stone and warm air and time. Behind her she heard Tom say quietly but clearly, "Derek, I need you in the office." She didn't look back. Carol Reeves found her near the east clear-story windows, standing apart from the main reception crowd with a glass of sparkling water she hadn't touched. The gala moved around Miriam like a river around a stone, conversations, laughter, the soft percussion of heels on marble, and she stood in it without being part of it, looking up at the window line she had drawn by hand in a Pilsen sublet 23 years ago. "You're in," Carol said, arriving slightly breathless, her silver earrings catching the light. "Thank God. Gerald's been asking." "I know," Miriam said. "Are you all right?" Miriam considered the question the way she considered all questions, honestly, without performance. "I'm thinking," she said. Carol lowered her voice. "Tom Heller called me. He said Derek is claiming you were disruptive." Miriam looked at her. "I know," Carol said quickly. "I know. It's not... He's covering himself." "He's been covering himself for 14 months, Miriam said. 3 complaints, 3 separate women, each one handled quietly, each one filed away, somewhere it wouldn't cause difficulty. She set the untouched water down on a nearby tray. "That's not a pattern that fixes itself." Carol was quiet for a moment. Around them, 2 architects were debating cantilever tolerances near the bar, their voices animated, their drinks gesturing. The room smelled of white roses and warm brass and the faint, expensive musk of 100 people dressed for an occasion. "What are you going to do?" Carol asked. "I'm going to talk to Gerald," Miriam said. "Tonight, in front of the room." Carol's breath caught. "Quote 111, quote 112, quote," Miriam said. "Quote 113, quote." Carol pressed her lips together. She nodded once, slowly, the way people nod when they understand something they wish they didn't have to. Miriam's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. A text from Marcus, quote 114, Miriam read the message twice. She thought about Jade, a young woman she had never met, standing at a coat check station with her phone held low and her brightness turned down, making a decision that nobody asked her to make, and that cost her something to make anyway. She typed back, quote 115 . She put the phone in her bag. She looked across the atrium to where Gerald Ashworth, the architecture board's president, was holding court near the award display. A tall man in a charcoal suit, white-haired, the kind of person whose presence rearranges a room without effort. He caught her eye across the distance. He said something brief to the person beside him. Then he began walking toward her, unhurried, the marble floor carrying his footsteps in clean, even sounds. Miriam picked up the leather notebook from her bag. She opened it. She read through everything she had written that evening, the times, the words, the exact sequence of what had been said and done and witnessed. She closed it. She straightened the strap of her canvas bag. Gerald was 12 steps away. Derek Farrow came back through the atrium doors at 8:47 p.m. Tom Heller was behind him, and behind Tom, Paul Gretsch, the operations director, Derek's original patron, moving fast and looking like a man who had just been told something he very much did not want to know. The room noticed. Conversations thinned. Glasses paused halfway to mouths. Derek saw Miriam standing with Gerald Ashworth near the award display. He stopped walking. His face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Pauter brie en daken tries mes eye. recognition, recalculation, and something that might have been the first cold touch of understanding. Gerald turned. He looked at Derek the way a building inspector looks at a crack that has been painted over. Quote 116 Gerald said. His voice carried without effort, the way voices do in rooms designed for acoustics. Derek said nothing. His jaw was set. His hands were at his sides. Gerald said. He turned slightly so the room could hear, not performing, simply not hiding. He gestured upward, toward the vaulted atrium that had taken Miriam 11 months to get right. Quote 120 The room was silent. Completely, absolutely silent. The saxophone had stopped between sets. There was only the faint hiss of the climate system Miriam had also specified, moving warm air through ducts she had drawn by hand. Derek's collar looked too tight. A thin line of perspiration had appeared at his temple. I was doing my job, he said. The words came out smaller than he intended. Your job, Miriam said quietly, was to check credentials. I had credentials. She opened her leather notebook. She didn't read from it. She didn't need to. You told me I looked like I wandered in from the street. You told me I didn't fit the guest profile. You asked me to leave twice. You called for security when I asked for your supervisor. You did all of that in front of witnesses. She closed the notebook. And you did the same thing to a professor in October and a woman in December. Both of them black, both of them credentialed, both of them handled quietly enough that nothing ever happened. The man in the charcoal suit near the welcome table looked at the floor. The woman with the champagne flute set it down on a tray and did not pick it up again. They were all replaying the last hour in their heads. They all knew which side of it they had been standing on. Derek's composure didn't shatter dramatically. It simply ran out, like a clock that has been wound too tight for too long, the mechanism finally going still. His shoulders dropped. The vein at his neck pulsed. His mouth opened and closed once without producing a word. We're done here, Miriam said. Not loud, not sharp, the way she would say it to a design that couldn't be saved, final, factual, without anger, because anger would have been too much of a gift. Gerald nodded once at Tom Heller. Tom touched Derek's arm. Derek walked. Before she left the gala that night, Miriam found Jade at the coat check station. The room behind them was slowly returning to itself. Conversations restarting, glasses refilling, the saxophone picking up again somewhere in the warm distance. Jade was straightening coat hangers. Her hands were steady now, but her eyes were red at the corners. You didn't have to do that, Miriam said. I know, Jade said. I did it anyway. Miriam looked at her for a moment. How long have you worked here? 11 months. And you saw it before tonight. It wasn't a question. Jade answered it anyway. Quote 133 Miriam nodded slowly. She reached into her canvas bag and produced a business card. Plain white, just her name and a number, no logo. She set it on the counter between them. Quote 134, she said. Quote 135, Jade picked up the card. She held it carefully, the way people hold things they don't want to crease. Thank you, she said. Thank you, Miriam said. 6 months later, Jade Simmons was working as a junior project coordinator at Coles' studio, sitting at a desk with a window that faced east and caught the morning light. She had started taking night classes in construction management. She kept Miriam's card in the front pocket of her work bag, even though she didn't need the number anymore. Derek Farrow was terminated within 48 hours of the gala. The architecture board launched a formal review of the Aldrin Center's event management practices. An employment attorney later confirmed that the 3 formal complaints, plus 4 additional accounts that emerged after Jade's footage reached 4.7 million views in 11 hours, Trace's race, were sufficient to constitute a documented pattern. Paul Gretsch, the operations director who had hired Derek through personal connection and ignored every warning sign, resigned quietly in February. Renata Osei, who had applied for the head of security position 14 months earlier and been passed over without explanation, was offered the role in March. She accepted. She redesigned the credentialing process from scratch in her first 2 weeks. Miriam released a public statement 9 days after the gala. It was 4 paragraphs. The last one read, "If this was happening at a venue that bears my work, I want to understand how, and I want it fixed. That begins with me." She established the Dorothy Coles Access and Equity Fund, named for her mother, the woman with the cracked knuckles and the evening shifts, which provided annual scholarships to black architecture students from working-class backgrounds. The first cohort of 6 recipients was announced the following autumn. On the morning after the gala, Miriam woke at 5:47. She made coffee in the chipped ceramic pour-over. She stood at the kitchen window and looked at the skyline. She opened her drafting tablet. She worked. The only thing that was different was the leather notebook, open beside her coffee cup. Each morning now, before she began, she wrote 1 line, the name of whoever had filed a complaint that week, not as a record of grievance, as a reminder that someone had trusted her enough to say something out loud. She capped the pen. She picked up her coffee. She looked out at the city she had spent 30 years helping to build. Then she went back to work, because that is what she had always done, and that, it turned out, was exactly where her power had always lived. Not in the moment anyone recognized it, but in every quiet morning before they did. If this story moved you, hit the like button and subscribe. We have more stories to tell. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done that night before Gerald walked in?